Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Throughout the world, Allah created man and all of the rest of the creations. If we have had the opportunity to travel, we have seen how man changes depending on where you are. Man's colors change, man's facial features change, the environment changes. Some places are cold, some places are hot, and people adjust to the various weather. And they have different looks about them, and they have different cultures that have developed in all of these places. These cultures sometimes are at odds with each other because they're so different from each other. They believe they're at odds with each other. But the truth is, there are an overriding similarity amongst all the cultures and amongst all the ways of being that overcome and are more powerful than all of the differences. God's creation is very subtle, and it's difficult to understand it. If we could understand it, we would enter into a state of great bliss. It's very rare that one understands it, but with understanding it come rewards that are beyond our imagination and beyond what words can describe. Man has this mysterious ability to understand the nature of God and the nature of man. Now, the nature of man is very difficult for man to understand. It's very difficult for any one of us to understand somebody else's nature and to understand what is going on in somebody else. And it's also very difficult for us to understand God and to understand the nature of God. But God made this creation, and we can measure the creation. The creation is made up of elements, and these elements can be measured, but we cannot measure Allah, we cannot measure God, and we cannot measure man. Only God can measure man. And God knows all of the needs of each man. And because he created him, he knows what to provide for each man. And because of that, we call him the compassionate and merciful one. We call him God. He gives to each as each one needs. And the difficulty that man has in trying to understand God is that God has an interrelationship with every man. God has an interrelationship with everything he created. God has these overriding relationship. He knows every man, and he knows what you need, and he gives you what you need. But man cannot know God. The only way that man can know God is to become God. If man were to know God and not be God, then there would be a duality. There would be someone who knows God that isn't God. And how can you possibly know God and not be God? God alone is. So for man to come to know God, man has to enter into that state where he has taken on God's qualities, where he has taken on the characteristics that are God's qualities. And this is a very rare thing. This isn't something that men have done and men can do. Now, each of us has a mind, and this mind continues to produce thoughts and make claims. And these claims are, I know, I know, I know. And there is an arrogance that builds up from this, I know, I know, I know. But inside the core of the mind, inside the core of consciousness, there is an understanding that you really don't know. And all of this is a make-believe. All of this is the mind's own arrogance. And for this reason, we have concluded, many of us, that it's necessary to find someone who in fact does have divine wisdom. When I was growing up, I noticed when I was talking to people that many of them had no idea what they were talking about, but it didn't stop them from talking. And it didn't stop them from claiming that they know the truth. Now, to know God is something that the intellect can't do. And religion stops at the point of intellect. So you can't know God through religion. You can't know God through science. You can't know God through books. You can know God from consciousness that goes beyond intellect. You can know God through having wisdom. And in having wisdom, you come to the point where you can understand the reality of existence. We go through this world, and in this world, we have a body. And in this body, we have this mind, which for many of us is our interface with reality, with the world. And we think that what goes on between our mind and ourselves and the world is real. But this body has many bodies in it. Understand that the body is made up of earth, air, fire, water, and ether. Each of these elemental sources has its own capacities and its own arrogance and its own way of being. So, because the body is made up of all of these, we actually have 5 separate bodies within our body, each of them trying to maintain an equilibrium amongst itself. But over time, this equilibrium and this agreement to cooperate falls apart, and the elements fall apart, and their arrogance comes forth. And when that happens, we fall apart, and the body falls apart. We live in many worlds. We live in this world that the mind depicts for us, but we also live in a world of arrogance, in a world of karma, and a world of illusion. And so, what is this world of arrogance? Arrogance is Satan. Think about it. The original arrogant action was when Satan disagreed with God as to the creation of man, saying that man would cause him terrible problems. And God said, "You don't understand the nature of man, and you don't understand what man is capable of." And Satan said, "I know, and I'm better." So arrogance is Satan. And within that arrogance is hell. And that is the road that arrogance takes us. And if we wish to live a life of arrogance, if we have lost the understanding of humility, if we believe in our own superiority, we are doomed in the same way that Satan is doomed. Now, we are also living a life of karma. And what is karma? Karma is this rolled up ball of all of the elements that is our being, that's our body. It came from our parents and it came by way of creation. We're all made of the same stuff, but the qualities within that stuff is a little different for each of us. And that is karma. Illusion is the shadow world that goes on in our mind that we live in that we think is real. Illusion is this shadow world that continuously creates new ideas, new thoughts, and new patterns. It's illusion. Illusion can take 15,000 different forms in the matter of an instant. And yet we follow it as if it had truth and if it had some kind of reality to it. We need to know that there are many different parts to us. And all of these different parts need to be analyzed and thought through. But in addition to the earth life, water life, air life, fire life, ether life, we also have the heart life within us. And the heart is the residence of the soul. The heart is the residence of the truth. Each of us needs to create a home for the soul and a home for God within our heart. So the mind creates a home for itself in arrogance, karma, and illusion, and in the desire for earth, gold, and women. And the mind creates worlds that are attached to the earth. The mind creates worlds that are attached to gold. The mind creates worlds that are attached to women. Each of these are illusory. Each of these are shadow worlds. Each of these are temporary existences, and each of these lead us into roads that have no path to them, that have no direction to them, that have no end to them. If we want to find direction in our life, If we want to find truth in our life, if we want to find a way out of all of our dilemmas in our life, we have to find someone who can explain the truth to us. Someone who is beyond the culture of society, someone who is beyond all of the trappings of society, all of the made up rules and regulations of society that hold it in place. When I met Bawa Muhaiyaddeen, my teacher, it was in 1972. And he was at that time staying in a house, I believe it was 46th Street in Philadelphia. And we went up to his room, which was a little room on the second floor of what's called a row house in Philly. Row houses in Philly are working class townhomes. They're about 18 feet wide, about 20 to 30 feet long, and very modest, and were lived in by working class people. They usually had 3 bedrooms on the second floor, a living room, dining room, and kitchen on the first floor. And that was it. And he was in one of the bedrooms upstairs. Now, when I approached him, he was sitting on his bed. He was a tiny being, probably weighed no more than 95 pounds. And his complexion was very, very dark. And the language that he spoke was the language of southern India, which is called Tamil. And there was a translator. This describes the visual effect and impact that this had on me. But the truth was, even though he looked entirely different from me, even though the language he spoke was entirely different than the language I understood, and even though I had to talk to him through a translator, there was no distance between him and me. He was there with me in the same way that I was there within myself. And I didn't see any differences between us other than the fact that he knew a lot more than I did. From the moment he spoke, I heard the truth. And for my life, it was the first time that I had heard truth spoken. And having heard truth being spoken, it was an overwhelming experience that brought me to a different place in my life. The mind travels at an immense speed. It can be in London, and then it can be in Mecca, and then it can be in New York, then it can be in San Francisco, and then it can be in Bangladesh, and then it can be in Pakistan. It can travel throughout the world in an instant. It can go everywhere. However, the mind cannot go to God. And the places where the mind cannot go is where God is. So if we can understand that the places that the mind takes us are the places where God doesn't exist, then we can understand that we need to look in other places to find truth. So the mind deals with desire and illusion and karma and arrogance. The mind deals with the attachment towards the world, towards earth, gold, and women. And the mind creates all of the dramas and the intrigues and the desires to interplay with all of these things and get reactions out of them. And many people spend their entire life involved in chasing gold, in chasing real estate, in chasing women, in chasing power, in chasing fame, in chasing all of these qualities that have to do with illusion, as if fame can do something for us in the eternal existence, as if ownership of things can do something for us in the eternal existence. God creates, sustains, protects, and absorbs. We have to be able to give up all that we've accumulated and return to Him. And we need to understand that. So, how does the mind think? And what does the mind think of? The mind thinks of and thinks through illusion. It thinks of the world and it thinks of creation. It adores creation and looks to accumulate creation. The mind looks to protect that which is temporary by nature. So the mind looks to protect each and every one of us in its own way. It looks to protect us by making us more important, by making us grander, by making us more beautiful, by making us more powerful, by making us more famous. All of these things are temporary in nature. So the mind thoughts and what the mind's capable of thinking of is temporary in nature. The heart, on the other hand, is not connected to earth, air, fire, water, and ether. It's not connected to that which is from the creation. The heart has the ray of the soul within it. So, in the same way that the mind has made a home out of gold, earth, and women, and this compromises its being, the heart has created a house for the soul out of the qualities of God. And in this heart, we can relate to reality through the qualities of God. So the heart's relation to existence and the mind's relation to existence are quite different. The mind relates to the temporary nature of our life, which for each of us gets cut off after a period of time. We've all come into this world as a body that has a time limit to us. But there is also the soul, which does not have a time limit and which we need to come to know. And this soul is that which is connected to God. And if we can begin to understand that, we can begin to understand things in a different way. The soul represents the qualities. The soul represents reality. Reality has no form in the sense that this world has form, in the sense that the elements have form, in the sense that we can measure things. The soul is beyond form, and our heart is cognizant of the qualities that make up this soul, the qualities that make up this part of us. And wisdom is what reacts to and from the heart. Wisdom finds our way into the heart, and then wisdom grows within the heart and expands as we come closer to understanding the nature of these qualities. Now, Allah, in his mercy, has made man in a way that man can understand Allah. But this is very rare, and this is very difficult. And the path to this understanding is through one who has enmeshed himself within those qualities and is a living embodiment, a visible embodiment, a worldly embodiment of divine qualities. These things can't be found through reading about them or through religions. The only way they can be found is through nearness. You have to be near these qualities to feel them and to become them. So, in other words, to learn mercy, you have to be around mercy. You have to be around someone who conveys mercy. To understand love, you have to be around somebody who loves. And as you see love, you can imitate love, and then you can become love. As you imitate mercy, you become mercy. You become the truth of those things. The reaction from one who acts through mercy as opposed to one who acts through arrogance is an entirely different kind of being, an entirely different kind of reality that goes on. Arrogance acts on its own behalf. Mercy acts on behalf of others. Allah gives. He maintains, sustains, protects, creates. Allah gives. Arrogance takes. Arrogance needs. Allah doesn't need. There is no way that we can take from Allah and in any way diminish him. There is no way we can take from God and in any way diminish him. His self is so overwhelming and so complete and is so perfect, there can be no diminishing of what and who he is. So when we enter into the states that are his qualities, when we enter into mercy, when we enter into compassion, when we enter into justice, no matter how much of it we give away, more comes to us. More comes to us, and we never run out. The idea that there is a minimum amount of things in this world is only in the elemental phases. If we enter into the transcendent qualities of the eternal, there is no diminishing them because they are absolute, they are complete, they are perfect, they are without beginning and end, and there's no way we can bring them down. And Allah, in His mercy, has allowed man to understand this. And man is the only creature who has been given this capability. So Allah creates, sustains, and nourishes and absorbs. And what is it that He absorbs? He absorbs man who has met his qualities and absorbed them. And then there is a merging. There is a merging between Allah and the man who has absorbed his qualities. They become at one. There is no dualism. They become at one. And what happens when you reach that point? You know, there is a Buddhist saying that the man before enlightenment carries wood, burns wood, and boils water. After enlightenment, man carries wood, burns wood, and boils water. Well, the point is that once this transcendence occurs, then the only time that exists for us is now. The only time that we know is now. The only thing that we deal with is whatever we are dealing with now. There is no future. There is now. There is no past. There is now. This moment is our only moment. This time is our only time. And we are in this time and in this moment, submitted to the truth. Movement stops. Delusion stops. Questioning stops. All that's left is submission. Submission to that which is one and that which is overwhelming. If we can begin to understand that, then we have reached that point where that which absorbs has absorbed us. And we live our lives without confusion. We live our lives without anxiety. We live our lives without pain. We live our lives without distress and without worry because we have reached that place of perfection, that place of submission to that which is one and alone. To reach that place takes a lifetime of work, or it takes an instant. But our consciousness has to have the intention that that place is the place that we wish to find for our own being. Every other direction in this world is a dead end, literally a dead end. The only place that leads us to truth is to find our Lord. And the only way to find our Lord is to become our Lord. And the only way to become our Lord is through someone who has done it. So we have to find a teacher. a teacher who's walked the path and has made his life the teaching to humanity so that they can walk the same path, who has made his life the teaching to humanity so humanity can understand the nature of oneness and end the duality that causes man so much problems. This world is so full of differences, and all of these differences lead to killings and war and destruction and a constant proclamation of I am greater, mine is greater, my religion is greater, my language is greater, my color is greater, my caste is greater. All of these are the creation of one God, and all of us are born of one mother and father, and we need to understand and realize that oneness that exists within all of us. And when we reach that place of unity, when we reach that place of oneness, then all of our difficulties disappear because we disappear. La ilaha illallah. Only God exists. I do not exist. And this journey is this journey of traveling from existence to so-called non-existence, which is in fact becoming the truth, becoming that state of man-God, God-man, where unity exists and unity is all that exists. May Allah make that state known to each of us. May He make the path that brings us to that state known to each of us. May everything that stands in our way, may delusion and illusion and arrogance and karma disappear from us so that we can find the truth that exists within us and fulfill the intention that God has for us, which is to come to know Him through becoming Him. May that be the fate for each of us. Ameen, Ameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.